would like, if I may, to take you on a strange journey.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Real Estate Realities with the Rebel Broker. My name's Robert Whitelaw, and I am the Rebel Broker. Licensed real estate broker in the state of California. Member of the National Association of Realtors. But please, don't hold that against me. Welcome to it, everyone. It has been a super busy few days. Really over the last week has been super busy. In fact, it has been so busy, it's made it very difficult to actually balance everything. I'm sure all of you have experienced that at some time or another. It's one reason why we didn't have a show Monday, and then we had a rerun of a show on Tuesday. Apologize for that. But between getting out there and looking at properties, getting my property ready to go, and just everything else going on in life, it was very, very tough. Things are progressing along with my own property. I'm supposed to have another visit tomorrow. Things got a little bit stalled with a hiccup relating to some window upgrades I was doing. I mentioned that a couple of weeks ago. That's all settled itself out, and now I can move on to another provider for that work. And I'm actually second guessing whether or not doing the window replacement makes a whole lot of sense in terms of payoff. So I guess I'm a little bit on the fence on that one. But the work on the kitchen and the work on the bathroom, the master bath and the other bathrooms in the home is going to proceed on schedule. And I would also like to give everyone an interesting heads up. I think I mentioned this, but I put up on Zillow for my home a make me move number. And what that number represented was how much would I take for the home if someone wanted to buy it before I did all of this work on it, because I thought it'd be great to have a potential to be able to advance my time schedule. And what I'm finding interesting is while I have had one real person, one normal person who really just wanted to consider buying the property, respond to that, the vast majority of them are dirty, dirty pants on fire real estate agents who are going to tell you a lie to get into your house. So let me give you the heads up on that. I suppose on some level it doesn't surprise me. But here's the line you're going to get. You'll have some number if you decide to use this technique, or maybe you have it out there. Maybe you've decided, you know what, my house right now is worth $400,000. So if someone were to offer me $450,000, I'd sell, right? So you've put that up on Zillow under the make me move thing. What you're going to find is that you are going to get contacted from, and this has happened more than once. It happened again today. This time I intentionally, the last couple of times it's happened, I didn't make mention that I was a real estate agent because I wanted to see where it would go. But I could see that the people who were contacting me were real estate agents. And even though I did make mention in the actual data of the description of the house that I'm a broker and realtors need not apply if they want to list the house, which I'm sure reduced the number of people trying to run this scam. What they're looking for is an opportunity to not buy your home. They're going to tell you that's what they're going to do. They're going to say that they are investors and they will buy all cash and they can close within 10 days, yada, 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 to make it sound as good as possible. And then they're going to want to set up a time to come and look at your property, and they're going to want to deliver the wonderful news that they can get your home sold for your make me move number. All you have to do is list with them. And of course, if you've got a reasonable make me move number, then that would make sense for you. if you're using a reasonable number, clearly they can do it, but they're willing. My experience is that they are willing to say any number. If you said a number that was $100,000 over what your home's actually worth, they'll say, no problem, we'll list it. Solely with the intention of just getting a listing for one of two purposes: to either actually sell it, if that happens to happen, or to take it in as a lost leader. So now in my case, the only way the I am willing to sell it at this price works for me. I'm not willing to pay any additional stuff. One reason why I'm doing it that way and not doing it through my MLS is if someone does happen to come along and we can come to an agreement on how this would work, I wouldn't come down on price. But it would be a situation where, since I'm not having to pay any kind of commissions, I'm just having to pay transfer fees and those types of things, the number I have selected would work for me. And given the changes that are on tap for the house, if the new buyer were willing to do that stuff themselves, they'd probably end up with a house that's worth about $100,000 more than they've spent all the way around. Whether the acquisition price plus the upgrade amount, they'd end up in the green. So it would work for someone who wants to buy it for themselves. The very first person who did this did what I just told you. Came out, did their whole 9 yards, came out and said, well, I may have alluded that they would have an investor who might be interested, but they need to get a listing. So they took it to the next level. They implied they had someone ready, willing, and able, but they'd have to have a listing first before we could do it. Oh, okay. So I said, well, that's fantastic. I tell you what, you bring the offer in with your listing paperwork and I'll be happy to do it, but I won't be signing any listing paperwork until it's done. Oh, and by the way, if you want a commission out of this, you'll have to come up with something between you and your buyer, because at this price, I'm not paying a commission. So then they tried to explain me how commissions work and how the seller has to pay it and all these other kinds of wonderful things. And I said, well, you know what? I'm actually a licensed real estate broker. So I know that's actually not the case, but thanks. And of course, at that point, she just left. The second one did almost the exact same thing, but at least didn't say I have someone ready and willing and able to buy. It was like, I don't have anyone right on tap right now. But if you'll give me the listing, I will get your home sold for what you're saying it's worth, et cetera. And I said, no, thank you. I'm a real estate broker. And that one decided to get angry at me. Even though the entire pretense of their visit was they had a buyer already ready to go at that price point. And I said, listen, I was extremely honest in the entry for this property. I put in there that I'm a broker. If your marketing is so blind, if you are so just jumping in on any property that's listed as make me sell and you're not reading it, that tells me two things. One, it tells me you don't have a buyer and you never did have a buyer for the property. And two, it tells me if you did, you're not even doing the bare minimum of reading the description of the property. So that person left in a huff. So that, one of the things I love doing in my business is really broadening my connections and networking with other agents. And now I've managed to network with two who will hate my guts forever. But what amazes me is did not have a single contact from an agent that was honest about the plan. Interestingly enough, the one that reached out to me most recently, who as soon as, and for that one, I actually mentioned I was a broker during the communication process, during the email process. That person just disappeared poof as soon as they realized I was a broker. That person was a top producer in their office, and so was one of the others. So, nothing. Every time I start getting soft on the idea that most real estate agents really stink, and just are annoying as all get out. As soon as I've been doing this long enough where I've been doing my own thing and haven't really had to deal with other agents the way the regular people on the planet have to deal with agents, right? Because this is how you'd get exposed to an agent, right? If you decided to go ahead and put in the make me move thing, out of the dozen or so folks who've reached out to me, 2 of them have been real people and the rest have all been agents. That should tell you something, right? So and as soon as they reach out to me, in my mind, they've already failed the first intelligence test of the process, right? They did not read the description of the property. And there's all this disingenuous interest in the details. Well, could you give us details on the property? So, well, if you read the description, everything that's been upgraded on the property is listed there. So, oh, yeah, no, we reviewed all that. We're aware of the situation. Oh, really? Okay. So, I'm a real estate broker then, right? Oh. So anyway, again, just more conviction that you have to be so careful with these folks you deal with. The scumbaggery is just overwhelming. But anyway, so and of course, man, I tell you, whenever I get on this kind of soapbox, and for those of you who've been listening for a long time, a really long time, for those of you who listened back in the days when my shows went 3 hours once a week, that I can occasionally get into rare form in how much I complain about agents. After all, the show was born from my frustration about how absolutely idiotic the real estate business is, and how rigged it is, and how brainwashed the public gets how brainwashed the public gets over what they think should matter in terms of performance numbers for real estate agents. That this little tirade should sound a little bit familiar, but probably less passionate. I remember yelling a lot more in some of my first shows in the early years of the show. So just beware. I like to, whenever I come across something that exposes yet another example of real estate agents being what they are, I like to point it out just so you can be cautious. And I would say that while the ratio concerns me, in terms of the number of agents who've reached out versus the number of real people, I would say that's still a pretty reasonable thing to do if you're just casually interested in potentially selling your property. Who knows how it might work out? And in terms of just sort of a general check on what's going on with the markets here. Now, the last time we talked about the local marketplace, I mentioned that prices were down in Morgan Hill, but up in Gilroy and Hollister, which are much further away. Gilroy's further away. Hollister is much further away in terms of being further away from the reason people buy here, which is typically to commute up to the Silicon Valley area to work. And so I went to tons of open houses over the weekend and on Monday. Lots of new listings, interestingly enough. More new listings to look at in Morgan Hill than in Gilroy, which I thought was interesting. And I got a chance to talk with buyers that are out there walking around and going, why are you looking here and not in Morgan Hill? And a lot of them will say, well, we are looking in Morgan Hill. We've got a search running in Morgan Hill, but Morgan Hill, the price is just too high. So I think my theory of we've reached this sort of plateau of what price people are willing to pay as an average price in Morgan Hill has sort of hit its stride, and people still perceive Gilroy as being a place to get a deal, and Hollister as well. So interesting dynamic. It's interesting to see because remember, we've talked about the mushroom factor before, where go to a hot market like Silicon Valley and then look for those communities just outside of it that could serve it as a bedroom community. And Morgan Hill actually very much fits that bill. Gilroy is about another 10 to 20 minutes away, given your decision on where in Gilroy you buy. And it's just interesting that folks are still making that decision. They're deciding that they're willing to trade that extra 10 or 20 minutes in order to save about $100,000 on a house. They can get not only a bigger house and a better house, but pay less for it. So interesting observation, and it indicates an overall softening, I think, in terms of where buyers are willing to go and the amount of debt that they're willing to assume. So I'm still keeping an eye on that. Okay, so my first story for today is going to seem a little odd. What we're actually going to get to today is the top 7 downtowns to watch. There's been a resurgence of downtowns. In the mid 90s, we saw a lot of resurgence in downtown areas. A lot of the hipster stuff started taking place, and downtowns have been experiencing really since then a revitalization in some areas more than others. And what we're going to do is look at the top 7 in terms of growth since 2012. So I think that's an interesting way to come at potential marketplaces. It might be a great opportunity for you to determine one of two things. Either by looking at the data for these specific downtowns, figure out, is it tapped out? Has it reached its high point and we're really kind of at the point where there's no real growth to be had there? Or is it an opportunity to say, still plenty of room to grow. This place is still going to be pulling or pulling in market. And then a third way to look at it is, with all of this growth, even if these numbers were to flatten out, does this spell a strong rental market for the foreseeable future? Because you still could be at a point where you're at a high point, but it still may make sense as a rental. You still could be in positive cash flow as a renter, as a landlord, and make that downtown investment work for you. And there's a certain amount of attractiveness to downtown locations. Usually you're strategically located, and that you usually are then able to have access to an awful lot of things people want to get to with a downtown location. So we'll take a look at those right after the break. But first, and boy, I'm probably going to get mocked for this, but this is a story that I have figured out a way to make it work. But the headline is, disorder can be good. Researchers discover that chaos makes carbon materials lighter and stronger. And I know what you're thinking, Robert, what are you talking about? What the hell do carbon fibers have to do with real estate? And it's more of a kind of an allegory, I guess, for the point I'm trying to make. Now, this comes from the MIT News, and I love this stuff. I love the MIT News site simply because they're always talking about cool stuff, and I like cool stuff. But what's interesting here is, which kind of gets me thinking anyway, is through a very precise process, they induce chaos in how carbon materials get made. And then this chaos results in lighter and stronger carbon fibers. Isn't that that seems like an odd dichotomy, right? It seems odd that you'd have to precisely control a process at a certain temperature, which then brings a chaotic process that, when it concludes, gives you better results than if that process was done through a more ordered way, if the carbon fibers were ordered in a more organized way, right? And I thought that so much of that feeds into real life. You can have these best laid plans. You can sit down and decide, here is exactly what I am going to do. And you have this great plan and you kick it off. And despite all of your planning and all of your preparation, it feels like what you've gotten yourself into is chaos. Just things are happening that you didn't make sense, that don't seem to line up. Maybe it's an escrow that you're working through. Maybe it's the negotiation process with someone on a property. But, don't be afraid of that chaos, because what comes out the other end may be lighter and stronger, or more effective and more profitable, or more in line with what's going to help you long term than you could have imagined from such a chaotic process. And so many people are scared by that chaos. They're scared by stuff that seems completely out of their control. And speaking as a guy who always comes up with at least one backup plan and always likes to be able to control things to a certain degree, this is a little bit scary. But as I mentioned, I've been doing a lot more kind of off-the-wall offers lately, and I've done several. Since the last time we've talked, I think I've done 3. But these are all creative deals. These are all lease option deals, or just different ways to organize the transaction that are a little bit off-center, but would help work with my situation. And if the market was a little bit different, it would be better. I mean, I think the offers I'm making would tend to work a lot better with houses that have been on the market forever, where the seller's a little bit disappointed and is feeling a little bit downtrodden. And of course, that's not happening. Homes are tending to sell relatively quickly right now. But it's been fun to do it. And in some cases, I get these responses that are almost like the equivalent of the deer in the headlights, right? A chaotic response of, no, I've never even heard of a deal like this. And then having to come back with, yeah, but if it works, it works. And when I read this article maybe a day or two after I had done one of these kinds of offers, and I thought, that's kind of an interesting connection to life, that just because these very meticulous plans may result in a chaotic process doesn't mean that once you come out the other end, you are not way better off than whatever level of organized occurrence you were hoping for the process. So I guess what I'm saying is, like any carbon fiber that wants to be lighter and stronger, embrace the chaos. So many people are intimidated by it. And maybe every once in a while, you need to just drop your pants and slide on the ice and see what happens. Because you know what? What's the worst case scenario? If you go through this with the proper attitude and you're putting things together, even if things completely fall apart, all you've lost really is a little time, really, in terms of putting together that offer. So don't be put off by the chaos. You might be surprised by how the situation turns around to giving you a situation where you can get an amazing deal because you were willing to embrace a little bit of that chaos. All right, sorry to go get all. I don't even know what to call it. Is that being spiritual? I'm not sure it is. But in any event, sort of just try to throw some ideas out there, maybe get your brain churning in a different direction. Now we're going to take a quick break, and then when we come back, we're going to quickly run through those 7 downtowns that are making big old comebacks in terms of growth in price, and see if maybe one of them might be perfect for you. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Are you ready to jump in and start your search for your first investment property? Maybe you've decided that it's time to own your own home, or maybe you're ready to sell your home and move on to something new. No matter what your goal is, the Rebel Broker can help. That's right, aside from hosting this show, I am also the owner, broker of Whitelaw & Sons Real Estate Services right here in Silicon Valley. With over 25 years experience serving Silicon Valley, Morgan Hill, San Martin, and Gilroy, I or one of my great agents can help you achieve your goals in real estate. So if you're ready to look into taking that next step towards achieving your real estate goals, point your browser at www.soldbyrobert.com. That's www.soldbyrobert.com and get in touch. Let me show you how I will earn your business and your respect. Again, that's www.soldbyrobert.com, or you can call me at 408-852-0525. California Bureau of Real Estate ID 00984-909.
Welcome back, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. I appreciate you all who trade 30 to 45 minutes of your day to spend with me. And I hope that when you walk away, you feel like those aren't minutes you wish you could get back, that you would have been better off hitting yourself over the head with a rock rather than listening to this stuff, and particularly about the last 20 minutes or so, since we spent some time talking about carbon fiber, which really didn't have much to do with real estate, but I hope I made some sort of connection there with you in terms of embracing the chaos just a bit. Now, let's go ahead and jump in to the big payoff for today, which is identifying some downtown areas that might just be the next place for you to spend a little quality time. Now, when I talk about quality time, what I'm referring to is putting into effect some of the skills we've covered in previous shows. So what am I suggesting? If any of these downtowns that hit our top 7 list appeal to you, the best thing to do is to start off by going and analyzing the downtown area and figuring out what areas make sense to you. What sounds good to you? And my suggestion would be to join the Rebel Underground. Of course, Rob's out there trying to get you to join another thing about me because it's all about me. But no, the Rebel Underground is all about making you more powerful in the wonderful world of real estate. And when you join the Rebel Underground by texting the word Rebel Broker to the number 44222, you will get immediate access to a exclusive Rebel Underground video that walks you through the process of focusing in on a neighborhood within different areas. And I can't remember what area I used. I think I used Sacramento, but this could apply anywhere. So feel free to join. Text the word Rebel Broker to the number 44222, and you'll get a response so you know that you're communicating with the right thing. Follow the prompt, and you're all set. And that video will walk you right through it over on YouTube. And again, it's only if you go to YouTube and you look me up, there is no video for you to find. It's only available to folks on the Rebel Underground. So you won't be able to get access to it just by going to YouTube. You have to get the link from the group. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump in. Dan Court, author of the book Downtown Turnaround, says, people, young ones especially, love historical buildings that reintroduce them to the past. They want to live where they can walk out of the house, work out, go to a cafe, and still walk to work. So I would say that that is a dynamic that's absolutely true and has been true probably for a really long time. But for me, it's compelling that the scratch or the itch that scratches is the historical part. I am a total geek for old buildings. I love repurposed buildings. I love some of the classic architecture. The 60s was not an era for classic architecture. A lot of the architecture of the 60s just is horrid. But there is still plenty out there. And so as I go through this list, and I suggested that you join the Rebel Underground in order to get access to that video, I'm going to want you to add an element for each one of these downtowns, what you need to do, in addition to looking at just the cold numbers of whether there's crime, where, all the various things that are going on in terms of fluctuation in prices and what areas look interesting. This is one of those things where once you get to the decision-making point, whether you are going there physically yet or not, you need to do some Googling and figure out what are the historic districts in these towns, in these downtowns. I think that makes a huge difference. And I think if you can get yourself into some of these buildings, now you don't necessarily want to be something that's in a historical registry, depending on what the regulations are. It can have a profoundly negative effect on your ability to do things to that property. So you'll want to find that out first. But by and large, in downtown areas where these buildings are actively being used as residences, as private homes, those types of things, you're not going to have to worry about that. But just something to keep in the back of your head, because these different rules and regulations relating to historical buildings can cause you problems if they require you to do restorations in a historically correct way. The costs and remodels can go through the freaking roof. So just keep that in mind. All right, so let's jump down the top 7. And at number 7, we are seeing Los Angeles, California. The median home price in downtown is $617,500. That's a price growth since 2012 of 63%. In addition to that, they've had a population growth of 10%, which is relatively good. And also, Los Angeles, California has got some. I've lived down in Southern California, and downtown can be pretty nice. There are areas where that $617,000 aren't going to let you touch some of the more interesting stuff, but there is some great architecture down there. They've got the 100-year-old Grand Market. More than half the food stalls are new recruits since 2013. The Downtown Independent Theater draws cool young crowds to its free screenings. And a deserted bank building was turned into the last bookstore. Let's see. They started getting to work on this revitalization in 1998 when developers converted the first vacant building into loft apartments. But there are some great old buildings down there. So I think LA is one of those ones that would have a long-term potential payoff. And what's interesting is there's lots of sub downtowns within the greater Los Angeles area that could also be entertaining. So definitely a market you might want to take a look at. Number 6 on the list is Austin, Texas. This one's really interesting because the numbers are interesting. First, the median home price in downtown is $395,500. So not a gigantic barrier to entry. That we are going to come across some downtowns with better prices, but there's also another interesting mix here that kind of breaks the mold for some of these other communities. The home price growth since 2012 is only 6%, but the population growth since 2012 is 25%. What you're going to find interesting is that that's an interesting comparison to some of these other downtown areas. And for me, despite the fact that Austin crops up at number 6, I would put Austin right there at the top of the list of the most potentially attractive, simply because for a lot of reasons, Austin is still one of those areas that I think has potential growth written all over it. And as population growth goes, the price of homes will grow as well. And I don't think that that's kept pace with the number of people who've moved to Austin. Now, as far as hipsters go, Austin is the place in Texas for them. South by Southwest is held there every year. I've been to South by Southwest a couple of times. It's becoming much more of a big event with each passing year. And I know I've been a big fan of Austin for a while. I'm not sure what my bias is there, but I sincerely think Austin still has a lot of potential growth left in it. All right, so number 5 on our list, Columbus, Ohio. This is a great one in terms of barriers to entry, and we've covered Columbus, Ohio before. We've talked about Columbus in other categories in terms of good investments to make, in terms of return on investment. But this one has a concerning trend in terms of the numbers, whereas this opposite trend in Austin sounded good. Here, it doesn't sound as good. Columbus, Ohio, median home price in downtown, $272,000. Home price growth since 2012, 20%. So a higher percentage of growth than Austin has seen by a lot. But population growth since 2012 only increased by 9%. That's a concern to me, and it indicates that we may not be seeing prices that are increasing at a rate that makes sense given the population growth. Now, of course, we can analyze those numbers all we like, but if we right now can go and do the math and see that there's positive cash flow on a downtown investment in Columbus, Ohio, well, then that kind of makes it all work out okay. It doesn't strike me as a volatile marketplace, although that 20% growth since 2012 is a little interesting. But again, the barrier to entry is only $272,000, so that's not so horrible. All right, number 4 on our list. And this one will kind of blow you away. Detroit, Michigan, median home price downtown, $219,900. Home price growth since 2012, 150%. Now, you'll remember back in 2012, we absolutely were talking about Detroit. It was one of our lists of places where if you had good ground truth and you could guide your investments well, you could make a ridiculous return on investment because we were talking about purchasing properties under $100,000. And that's exactly what these numbers bear out. Here we are 5 years later. Now, the population growth since then is only 15%. I'm not sure it concerns me quite as much just because of how hard hit Detroit was by automotive employment related things and just the downturn in general. So I think Detroit may be a good option, particularly since it still remains a low barrier to entry in terms of acquisition costs. But again, it'll come down to the math of what makes sense in terms of rentals. Still, I don't feel comfortable enough with Detroit just because all the news I ever hear coming out of Detroit, aside from some of these real estate numbers, tends to concern me. But it just brings home the truth that ground truth is what's going to save you in Detroit. If you know the right areas, you're going to be able to do well there. And in reality, by checking crime levels in different neighborhoods and all these other sorts of things, you're probably going to be able to at least get close to areas that would make sense in terms of retaining their value. And particularly since you can go on to places like Trulia and you can see where crimes are happening, where rents are higher. And what I usually do is I'll look at 3-bedroom, 2-bath homes, and I'll take representative properties from different areas of town to get an idea, right? To get an idea of where are folks paying more to live in those different areas of town. All right. Number 3, Oakland, California. Now, no town that I've ever been to. I've been to Oakland quite a few times. It's actually where I had to go to take my real estate exam. In terms of downtown revitalizations, having been a guy who's driven around in Oakland and downtown in various areas, I think I've mentioned before I spent some time in the 90s as a emergency medical technician. So I was driving an ambulance and having to go to different areas in Oakland in the mid-90s. And it was not a great experience. It did not encourage one to relocate there. They used to call Oakland, according to this article, the Detroit of the West. And it wasn't a compliment. This is back when murder rates were so crazy. But the downtown area has really experienced a real boost. Over the last few years, the city has bulked up its police force and installed effective crime-stopping community efforts. In 2016, 88 murders were recorded in Oakland. Still a lot, but substantially down from the 145 a decade ago. Crime is concentrated on the east side, Well, downtown has become a lot safer. It's been a while since I've been to downtown Oakland, but I've talked to folks who live there and have been there for a long time and say the difference is a bit like between night and day. So let's jump in. Median home price downtown in Oakland is $688,000. Home price growth since 2012, just 5 years, 111%, with population growth of 2012. Now, one reason why, and this price is nuts. I mean, this is clearly not for someone who's doing their first real estate deal. But this one's interesting because it absolutely saw some of its greatest growth over the last couple of years as we got the mushroom effect from San Francisco, where people suddenly realized, I am not going to spend on average $1.2 million to live in San Francisco when I can go across the bridge to Oakland and pay half that or less. A few years ago, it was far less than $688,000 for a downtown Oakland home. And then just commute. Either drive or take the ferry. So that's what this is kind of leveraging off of. And if you want to talk about gentrification, my feeling is that that's exactly what's going to happen with a lot of these areas in the downtown area of Oakland. It's already happening. I know I'm not being a fortune teller on this one. It's in process. It's absolutely happening. And there's actually some groups that are upset about it. So when you start hearing folks complaining, you know that the gentrification is in full swing. All right, number 2 on our list, Indianapolis, Indiana. Median home price $309,400. Home price growth since 2012, 20%. Population growth since 2012, 10%. Those numbers sound reasonable to me in terms of expectations on what would happen relating to prices, given how many people move into the area. I've never been to Indianapolis, but it's making number 2 on this list. And if I'm not mistaken, Indianapolis also was on our list 2 years ago when it came to quality of life type stuff, activities, exercise, folks who were more physically active type stuff that you could do in the area where it was bike trails or other types of things. And number 1 on our list, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, with some really interesting numbers that are kind of compelling. Median home price in downtown, $353,000. Home price growth since 2012, 31%. Population growth, 32%. So talk about just a correlation that seems to make sense and feel relatively right. Pittsburgh is right there in the center. When the steel industry completely went under in the late 1970s, Pittsburgh was really knocked out. About 150,000 manufacturing jobs just vanished. Companies went bankrupt. Stores downtown shuttered. Cultural district turn-of-the-century theaters were left to deteriorate, and the businesses left were mostly strip joints, massage parlors, and low-end bars. Let's see. Renovation of the theaters, bringing a slew of concerts and other types of things downtown started up. There has been all kinds of effort to revitalize the downtown, and it's absolutely been working. They've got the downtown Golden Triangle with rooftop bars, hipster-fied eateries, and craft breweries. The renovated Market Square Place is buzzing day and night, and there's even an influx of experimental public art. The latest installation in an interactive jukebox that played soundtracks while 6,000 LED lights flashed. Again, this is another town we've talked about in the past in terms of revitalized downtowns. In fact, I think it came up in our show last year about following the hipsters, right? Remember when we did our show, our interview with the author of Risk Game by Francis Greenberger, and we gave away 4 copies to lucky listeners of the show back when we did that. It was the thing he talked about in terms of identifying where either the hipster thing was just starting to happen, which is one way to go. I mean, that if you've come late to the game and you're just starting to see the hipster thing happening, and you can identify that by seeing brand new coffee shop type places and art galleries, those types of things. But if the people you're seeing hanging out, the demographics of the people who are there is changing, then you're even further ahead of the curve, right? Because then those things tend to follow them, and with them comes further gentrification. And that's a way to really ride that train into a profitable investment. And Pittsburgh is one of those places that gives us the opportunity to blend an awful lot of what I've talked about today. So we can do the hipster thing. We can do the classic architecture thing. Pittsburgh's been around for a really long time. And Pittsburgh has a very interesting history architecturally, a lot of different types of architecture. You could get something that is in a beautiful building in a very desirable downtown area that takes advantage of this migration of the hipster, so that you are taking advantage of that and then being able to grow your property with it. And at the rate this is happening, it wouldn't surprise me if you can, by projecting some additional numbers into this marketplace and getting a little bit more details about what makes up downtown Pittsburgh, you would be able to either acquire a very stable piece of property that over the long term is going to give you great returns as a landlord, or B, purchase a property that with some refurbishing would end up being a great flip. It seems like a place that would lend itself to that. Another one that I thought sounded good in terms of a potential flip, I think Oakland is one of those places, but because of the acquisition costs, it may make that near impossible. But I know the gentrification process is still going on in Oakland. It's a little bit late in the process, but I think there's still room to take advantage of it, simply because costs are so much lower there than place. It's half the price on average than a lot of other places that are within an easy commute of Oakland. So something to consider. All right, folks. I do appreciate you making this show a part of your daily routine. My hope each and every day is that you find you get far more out of the show than you've invested in terms of the time you spent listening to me go on about this stuff. Thanks again for listening, and I'll talk to y'all next time.